all have to accept going in. There is not going to be an answer that is going to make everyone happy. These are impossible circumstances. So what do we know about where the league's head is right now?
They started talking about this sort of in earnest yesterday. What do we do? The possibility of just sort of not resuming the game. And as Adam mentioned, calling it a no contest, which would be the same as if it had ended in a tie. In terms of the standings, would be the same as if it ended in a tie. I think that's very much on the table, and I think there's a possibility that we're going to get some level of news on this, possibly as early as today. The other possibility, you say many possibilities, but given the timing, given that this is happening in Week 17, Week 18, there is a limited number of things they could actually do. There aren't bye weeks to push games into, et cetera. The other possibility would be to, if you felt you needed to play that game, push the entire playoffs back by a week and play that game as a standalone in what would then be a Week 19. I don't think there's much appetite for that, but it would answer the question of the fairness of completing every game and everybody having the same number of games. But again, you heard Adam talk about how people are feeling about this game. We just talked about how we're not sure teams are going to be ready to play even this week, let alone next. So I think I think we'll get some news on this in the next day or two, possibly today. As we sit here, my sense is the most likely outcome is that they will not resume this game.
Yeah, and I think the first thing you said also is right, which is at the end of the day, there really are only two options. One, don't play the game, and the other is to play the game and then figure out how you go from there, making it work as best as can for everybody. So, D. Wood, how and in what way should fairness factor into all of this? We all understand that we're dealing in circumstances now that are so much more important even than who winds up winning a championship, obviously, but that does matter. It's certainly not unimportant. How should they take all of that into account as they figure this out?
I think because of where we are in the season, I think, like I agree with what Adam Schefter's saying. Sometimes life isn't fair. It's just, you're just running into a time crunch right now. Me personally, I don't see how they make up this game. I think Adam hit it around the head. I think there's just bad mojo with this game. I don't know if guys will want to go back to Cincinnati and play that game and kind of relive that whole situation. I think it's going to be a situation where, quite honestly, X out that game. Kansas City more than likely is going to be the #1 seed, and life is just going to have to go on, and guys are going to have to just deal with things. Listen, players deal with things all the time. Mm-hmm. That's just part of reality. That's part of the season. Season is part of it, has different flows and stuff like that anyway. And I just think that there's just not enough time to go out here and kind of fix everything that happened from Monday night.
There was something that happened yesterday, scheduling-wise, to pay attention to. They announced that the Ravens-Bengals game on Sunday would start at 1 p.m. Eastern. Mm-hmm. Previously, they had announced that game would be a 4:25 game if the Bengals won Monday night. Because if the Bengals if the Bengals lost Monday night, because that would have made it an AFC North championship game. So the fact that they've now put it at 1 o'clock, does that indicate maybe that they're saying that they're not going to pick that game back up because then that would mean that the Bengals have already clinched the AFC North?
Correct. To connect those dots there again, if the game is not made up on Monday night, the Bengals are the champions
Correct.
of the
Ravens
AFC North. That has already been decided. How much should they take into account the overall fairness of scheduling and competitiveness in all of this?
I think first and foremost, the #1 thing that they need to be aware of is the health and safety of the players. If you're asking them to play 2 games within a week span, a 5-day span, I don't think that it is possible for them to make this game up. Mm-hmm. And then even pushing back a week, there's logistics to everything if you push things back a week. Yeah. I mean, there's hotel reservations. There's other things that have to be addressed that probably won't work. So I don't see how they can make this game up. I really don't see how they can make it work. I don't see how they can think it's fair to even the Bengals and the Bills to have them play 2 games within a span of 2 weeks. And then what do they do moving forward for a bye week? Again, I understand everyone else has played 17 games and they're playing 16. But then this goes back to the fact that they wanted to add an extra game to the season. And now, the health and safety of the players being #1 was what the NFL is always preaching now. I don't see how they can fairly get this done and not put the players at risk of injury.
It does feel like the likeliest outcome here, Dan, you've said it, is that they wind up announcing at some point that the game will not be made up. But we do not know that, and we will continue, of course. Dan is working the phones. Thank you for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.